Nestled in a valley surrounded by misty hills, the small town of Gloomwood seemed ordinary at first glance. Its cobblestone streets wound past tidy houses, and cheerful signs hung above local shops. But if you stayed long enough, you'd notice something was off. There were no streetlights in Gloomwood, no porch lights shone at night. As soon as the sun set, the town became pitch black, wrapped in an unnatural darkness that no one dared to break. The townsfolk would never say why. Visitors who asked were met with polite but curt responses. "Electricity bills are too high," one shopkeeper might say. "Too many stars to waste it," a waitress would add. But people whispered to one another when they thought no one could hear. They whispered about what happened when someone lit up the night. It began with a stranger. Owen was just passing through. He worked as a freelance journalist and often stopped in small towns to hunt for unique stories. Gloomwood's eerie quietness intrigued him immediately. He checked into the only inn, a creaky old building called the Weeping Willow. The innkeeper, a wiry old man named Gus, seemed surprised to see him. "Most people leave by nightfall," Gus said, handing Owen a key. "Not much here to stick around for." "That's perfect," Owen replied with a grin. "I'm looking for quiet." Gus didn't smile back. "You'll get quiet here, all right." That evening, Owen unpacked his belongings in his room on the top floor. Through the window, he could see the sun dipping below the hills, painting the town in orange and gold. The streets were bustling with life, kids playing, couples strolling hand in hand. But as the sunlight dimmed, a strange transformation began. People hurried indoors, locking their doors and windows. The streets emptied, and by the time the last rays of daylight vanished, the town was silent. The darkness outside was absolute, a thick blackness Owen had never experienced before. He flicked on the lamp in his room, but the faint glow felt small and helpless against the dark pressing against the windows. "I don't get it," he muttered to himself. "What's everyone so scared of?" As a journalist, he couldn't resist exploring. Grabbing his flashlight and camera, he stepped out into the hallway. The inn was quiet, except for the faint creaking of floorboards. Downstairs, Gus was seated by the front desk, reading by candlelight. He looked up sharply as Owen descended the staircase. "Where are you going?" Gus asked. "Just taking a walk," Owen said. "I want to see what makes the night here so special." "Don't," Gus said, his voice low and firm. "Stay inside. Lock your door. You'll thank me in the morning." Owen chuckled nervously. "What is this? Some old town superstition? Ghost stories for tourists?" "It's no story," Gus said. "People who wander out at night don't come back." But Owen wasn't easily scared. "I'll be careful," he said, and stepped outside before Gus could protest. The moment Owen set foot outside, the blackness seemed to close in around him. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, but only barely. The silence was suffocating. Even the usual sounds of crickets and owls were absent. He walked down Main Street, his boots echoing on the cobblestones. The town looked utterly lifeless. Not a single window had a light on. As he moved farther from the inn, he began to notice strange things. Shadows seemed to flicker and move just at the edge of his flashlight beam. Shapes that shouldn't have been there. Once or twice, he thought he heard footsteps behind him, but every time he turned, no one was there. "Get a grip, Owen," he muttered, shaking off the growing unease. But it didn't work. Then he saw it. Near the edge of town, by an old well, something was glowing. It was faint, like the light of a single match, but it stood out against the endless black. Curious, Owen moved toward it. The light grew stronger as he approached, and he realized it was coming from a lantern, a small, old-fashioned one. It hung from the well's wooden frame, flickering softly. "Someone must have left it here," Owen said aloud. But something about the lantern didn't sit right with him. For one, its flame didn't cast shadows the way it should have. The light felt wrong. Still, Owen snapped a photo, but as the camera clicked, a new sound broke the silence, whispering. At first, it was faint, like a breeze through leaves, but then it grew louder, words forming in languages Owen couldn't understand. He turned around, shining his flashlight wildly. The whispers surrounded him, coming from every direction, and then he saw them. Dozens of shadowy figures standing at the edges of the light. They were barely visible, darker than the night itself, their forms shifting and blending with the dark around them. But their eyes, hundreds of glowing golden eyes, were fixed on him. Owen stumbled backward, his heart pounding. "What the hell?" he whispered. The shadows moved closer, their shapes twisting unnaturally, as if they weren't bound by the laws of the physical world. Owen turned and ran. He sprinted down the street, the flashlight beam shaking with each step. Behind him, the whispers grew louder, merging into a terrifying cacophony. The shadows were chasing him. He ducked into an alley and pressed himself against the wall, trying to catch his breath. He switched off his flashlight, hoping the darkness would hide him. For a moment, the whispers faded. The shadows drifted past the alley, their golden eyes scanning the streets. Owen clutched his chest, trying to stay silent. But just as relief began to wash over him, he felt something cold brush against his arm. He looked down and saw a shadowy tendril curling around his wrist. "No!" he screamed, yanking himself free. He switched his flashlight back on and bolted for the inn. By the time he reached the inn, he was gasping for air. He slammed the door shut behind him and collapsed on the floor. Gus was there, holding a shotgun. "You're lucky you made it back," he said grimly, helping Owen to his feet. "Not many do." What were those things?" Owen stammered. Gus sighed heavily. "They're the reason we don't like the night. Shadows hate the dark, but they despise the light even more. When you shine a light, it calls to them. They come to snuff it out, and anyone holding it." "That doesn't make any sense," Owen said. "Why not just leave the town?" "They're not bound to the town," Gus said. "We are. Gloomwood's been cursed for generations. Those who stay belong to the dark now." Before Owen could respond, the whispers began again, louder this time. The shadows had found him. Gus locked the door and lit several candles, placing them around the room. The flickering flames pushed the shadows back, but it was only temporary. "Upstairs!" Gus shouted. "Move!" They rushed up to Owen's room, slamming the door behind them. Gus set up a circle of candles, their faint light forming a protective barrier. But the shadows were relentless. They clawed at the windows, their golden eyes glowing with fury. "We can't hold them off forever," Gus said. "There's only one way to end this." "What do you mean?" Owen asked. Gus hesitated, then handed Owen a piece of paper covered in strange symbols. "The ritual. You have to do it at the well." "What happens if I don't?" Gus stared at him. "Then you'll become one of them, just like the others." Owen didn't want to go, but he knew he didn't have a choice. Armed with Gus's instructions and a lantern, he made his way back to the well. The shadows swirled around him, but he forced himself forward. At the well, he placed the lantern down and began reciting the ritual. The symbols on the paper burned into his mind as he spoke. The shadows screamed, their forms writhing in agony. The golden eyes blinked out, one by one. As Owen finished the ritual, the lantern's flame flared brightly, lighting up the entire town. The shadows vanished, and the night was still. Owen woke up in his room the next morning, unsure if it had all been a dream, but as he walked through Gloomwood, he saw something that made him smile. For the first time, the town wasn't dark. Streetlights lined the cobblestones, and sunlight streamed through the windows. The curse had been lifted, and the shadows were gone. But in the back of his mind, Owen couldn't shake the feeling that the dark hadn't forgotten him. Blackstone Creek was a small town nestled in a valley surrounded by hills and forests. It was peaceful, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, and everyone waved hello. But like all towns, Blackstone Creek had its secrets. The biggest secret of all was the abandoned mill on the edge of town. The mill had been closed for decades, ever since a fire broke out and killed the workers inside. People said it was cursed, and anyone who went there would disappear or come back. Different. No one really talked about it anymore. It was just a part of the town's history, like an old scar people tried to forget. But when a stranger named Daniel arrived in Blackstone Creek, things began to change. Daniel was a journalist, looking for a story. He had heard about the abandoned mill and the strange rumors surrounding it. This is perfect, he thought. A spooky, forgotten place with a dark history. People loved stories like that. Daniel rented a room above the diner and started asking questions. Most people avoided him when he mentioned the mill. They shook their heads and muttered warnings. "Some things are better left alone," one old man said. But not everyone was so cautious. A group of teenagers hanging out by the diner overheard Daniel's questions. One of them, a girl named Kara, smirked. "Do you want to know about the mill?" she asked. "I can show you." The other teens looked uneasy. "Don't mess with that place, Kara," one of them said. But Kara just shrugged. "It's just an old building," she said. "Nothing to be afraid of." Daniel and Kara made plans to visit the mill the next night. "Meet me at the old bridge by the creek," Kara said. "Bring a flashlight." That night Daniel couldn't sleep. He stared out the window, thinking about what he might find. Was the mill really cursed, or was it just an ordinary building with a tragic past? Either way, he needed to see it for himself. The next evening, Daniel walked to the bridge. Kara was already there, holding a flashlight and wearing a confident grin. "You ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Daniel replied. They crossed the bridge and followed a narrow path through the woods. The trees grew thicker, blocking out the moonlight. The air was cold, and the only sounds were their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After about 20 minutes, they reached the mill. It was a hulking structure, its wooden walls blackened by fire and time. The roof was half collapsed, and vines crawled up the sides like veins. It looked dead, but something about it felt alive. Kara pushed open the heavy front door, which creaked loudly. The smell of burnt wood and damp earth filled the air. Daniel shone his flashlight around, revealing broken machinery, piles of ash, and old tools scattered on the floor. "This place is a death trap," Daniel said, stepping carefully over a rusty gear. Kara laughed. "What did you expect? A tourist attraction?" They explored the main room, which was filled with giant rusted machines. Daniel took pictures, his camera flash lighting up the darkness. But the deeper they went, the stranger things became. The air grew colder, and a faint sound echoed through the building. It was hard to tell what it was, wind perhaps, or whispers. "Did you hear that?" Daniel asked, his voice low. "Hear what?" Kara replied, though her smile faltered. The sound grew louder, and Daniel realized it wasn't the wind. It was laughter, high-pitched and eerie, like children playing. But there were no children here. There was no one here. They followed the sound to a set of stairs leading down. Kara hesitated. "Maybe we shouldn't go down there," she said. "You're not scared, are you?" Daniel teased, though his hands trembled. Kara rolled her eyes. "Fine, let's go." The basement was colder than the rest of the mill. The walls were lined with stone, and the floor was damp. Daniel's flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows. In the center of the room was a large metal door, partially open. Strange symbols were scratched into the metal, and the air around it felt heavy. "What is this?" Daniel whispered, stepping closer. Kara didn't answer. She was staring at the door, her face pale. "We should leave," she said. But Daniel was already reaching for the door. He pulled it open, revealing a dark tunnel that seemed to stretch forever. The laughter was louder now, echoing from the depths. "I need to see where this goes," Daniel said, stepping into the tunnel. "No, you don't." Kara grabbed his arm, but it was too late. The door slammed shut behind them. The tunnel was narrow and damp, with roots hanging from the ceiling. The laughter had stopped, replaced by a low rumbling sound. It felt like the walls were alive, pulsing with energy. "We need to get out of here," Kara said, her voice trembling. "I don't think we can," Daniel replied. The door behind them was gone, replaced by solid stone. They walked deeper into the tunnel, the sound growing louder with each step. Eventually, they reached a large chamber. In the center was a circle of stones, and inside the circle was something. It was hard to describe. It looked like a shadow, but it moved on its own, twisting and writhing. It had no face, but Daniel felt it watching him. "What is that?" Kara whispered, backing away. Before Daniel could answer, the shadow lunged toward them. It moved faster than anything he'd ever seen, wrapping around them like smoke. Daniel and Kara woke up on the ground outside the mill. The sun was rising, and the air was warm, but something was wrong. The town was quiet, too quiet. They walked back to Main Street, only to find it empty. Cars were parked, doors were open, but there were no people. "What happened?" Kara asked, her voice shaking. Daniel didn't answer. He noticed something in the reflection of a shop window. Behind them, in the shadows, something moved. It was following them. Daniel and Kara were never seen again. Some say they became part of the curse, trapped in the shadows. Others believe they brought something back with them, something that still waits in the dark, watching and whispering. The mill remains abandoned, a silent reminder of the town's darkest secret. And if you listen closely at night, you can still hear the laughter. Hollow Creek was a tiny town tucked away between hills and dense forests. Life moved slowly there. Kids played in the park after school, families gathered at the church on Sundays, and strangers rarely passed through. But there was one thing everyone knew to avoid: the fog. The fog wasn't like any ordinary mist. It wasn't just weather or a change in temperature. The fog came without warning, rolling in thick and cold, swallowing the streets and muffling all sound. Worst of all, people who wandered into it sometimes didn't come back. Most in town dismissed the stories as old wives' tales meant to keep children indoors at night. But some folks knew better, especially old Mr. Grayson. He ran the general store and loved telling stories. "You mark my words," he'd say, wagging his finger. "The fog has a hunger. It ain't natural." Sam, Jake, and Ella were 3 teenagers who didn't believe in ghost stories. They had grown up hearing about the fog and how dangerous it was, but to them, it was just another small-town superstition. One cool October evening, Sam was in a daring mood. "Why don't we settle this once and for all?" he asked his friends. "Settle what?" Ella asked, tying her hair into a ponytail. "The fog," Sam said with a grin. "We'll go out into it next time it comes and prove it's just regular old fog. Nothing creepy about it." Jake hesitated. He was taller than Sam and Ella, and had always acted as the cautious one. "What if the stories are true?" "They're not," Sam insisted. "It's just mist. People who disappeared probably got lost or moved away." "Come on, Jake, don't be a baby." Ella laughed. "Jake, don't tell me you're scared of fog." Jake scowled, not wanting to look like a coward. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "But only for a little while. And we stick together." It didn't take long for them to get their chance. The very next night, the fog came creeping in as the sun went down, blanketing Hollow Creek in a thick, ghostly gray. Sam, Jake, and Ella met at the old bus stop on Elm Street, where the fog always seemed to settle first. They had flashlights, phones, and a thermos of hot chocolate Ella had brought to keep things fun. Sam said, "Let's head toward the old train station. That's where most of the stories come from." The trio ventured into the fog, their footsteps muffled by the damp ground. The mist curled around them like it was alive, swallowing up streetlights and familiar landmarks. "This is kind of spooky," Ella admitted, staying close to Jake. "See?" Sam said, his flashlight beam cutting through the haze. "It's just fog. Nothing to." A deep, low sound interrupted him. It wasn't loud, but it was strange, like the groan of something ancient and heavy. "What was that?" Jake asked, his voice tight. "It's the wind," Sam said quickly, though he wasn't so sure. They pressed on, the sound following them, growing louder and closer. After what felt like hours, they reached the old train station on the outskirts of town. It had been abandoned for decades, its windows boarded up and walls covered in graffiti. "We made it," Sam said, trying to sound triumphant. "See? No monsters. Just fog and old buildings." Ella shivered. "Can we go back now? This place gives me the creeps." But then they heard a noise inside the station, a soft tapping, like footsteps. Jake froze. "Someone's in there, or something," Ella whispered. Sam rolled his eyes, though his grip tightened on his flashlight. "It's probably a raccoon or something. Come on, let's check it out." They entered through the broken door. The air inside was colder, the fog seeping through cracks in the walls. The tapping sound continued, echoing faintly. "Hello?" Sam called out. His voice sounded small in the empty space. No answer. They split up, reluctantly, to search the dark corners of the station. Ella stayed near the entrance, while Jake and Sam explored the back rooms. Suddenly, Ella screamed. Sam and Jake ran back, nearly tripping over each other. "What happened?" Sam asked. Ella pointed to the far wall, where a shadowy figure was etched into the fog, a figure that moved. It didn't walk or run. It simply floated, its shape melting and reforming, like the mist itself had taken a body. "Run!" Jake shouted, grabbing Ella's arm. The three of them bolted from the station, but the figure followed, gliding silently behind them. The fog seemed to thicken, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Their flashlights flickered, their beams swallowed by the mist. "This way," Sam yelled, leading them back toward town. But no matter how far they ran, the streets didn't look familiar. The fog twisted the world around them, and they felt like they were running in circles. "We're lost," Ella panted, tears streaming down her face. Jake stopped, his chest heaving. "No, we're not. We just need to." The shadow appeared again right in front of them. It had no face, but they could feel it watching them, its presence heavy and cold. Sam threw a rock at it, but the stone passed through as if it wasn't there. The shadow rippled and then rushed toward them. They screamed and ran, ducking into an alley. The fog closed in, and soon they could barely see each other. Even their voices sounded muffled, like the air had swallowed them. Ella clung to Jake, her breathing shallow. "It's going to get us." "No, it won't," Jake said, though he didn't believe it. Sam, still leading, stumbled upon something strange. A wooden archway in the middle of the street, covered in moss and strange carvings. It didn't belong there. He stopped and stared. "What is this?" Ella and Jake caught up, their eyes widening. The archway seemed old, ancient, and it hummed with a faint, eerie energy. "The fog's coming from here," Ella whispered. The shadow appeared behind them, its formless body stretching toward them. "Through the arch!" Sam shouted. "Are you crazy?" Jake asked, but there wasn't time to argue. They ran through the archway, and everything went black. When they woke up, it was morning. The fog was gone, the town bathed in sunlight. They were lying on the grass in the town square, as if nothing had happened. But things weren't the same. Ella swore she saw the shadow watching her at night. Jake had terrible dreams about the archway, hearing whispers in his sleep. And Sam. He started acting strange, his eyes dark and haunted. The three friends stopped talking about that night, but the memory lingered. The fog of Hollow Creek hadn't just been mist. It had been something else, something alive, something hungry. And they had a feeling it wasn't done with them yet.